Now, just as we have the list view for fetching a list of data, we also have a detail view for simplifying views like this. Whenever you, in the end, have the goal of returning a template for a GET request with data about a single piece of data, using the detail view instead of a template view with your own logic for fetching that data could be worth a closer look. Now, how do we use the detail view? It starts with importing it, and we also import it from Django views generic. There we can import the detail view. Once imported, we inherit from it. So here for the single review view, I now inherit from the detail view. Now that detail view needs to know for which model it should fetch a single instance. So we should set the model property just as we did it on the list view. And of course here also set it to review. We also set the template name to let the view know which template to render. Now we don't need to set getContextData anymore, though we could if we would have extra context that should be passed in. But for fetching a single piece of data based on that model, we don't need to add this, so I can get rid of it here. Because Django will automatically load a single piece of data. So now the question just is, how does Django identify a single item? And the answer is, it uses a slug or the primary key. And what it should use is defined by you in your URLs. Now here we have that ID identifier, which we used for finding an element by ID. Now what we have to do here for the detail view to work is we need to change this from ID to PK. This tells Django that the value which is about to be entered here should be treated as a primary key value by which Django should find a single piece of data. So if I use int PK here, Django will go to my database and find an entry with the value that was entered here as a primary key. And it will use whichever model field is set up as a primary key field. And by default, that's the automatically added ID field, which every model has. With this added, if we save everything, we now have a way of telling Django how to identify a single object. We have our single review view in place. And therefore now if you load, let's say review/1, we load the page for this single item. Now what's interesting is that this works out of the box, even though in our template for the single review, I'm using review here. So here, Django automatically took the model name, basically, all lowercase, and exposes the fetched single piece of data through that model name to our template. Alternatively, we could use object. That's another key which we can use to access the exposed data in our template. So if I use object and reload, this still shows up correctly. But the model name, all lowercase, also works just fine, as you can tell. And therefore, if you have a scenario like this, where you want to fetch a single piece of data based on some model, using the detail view could also be a nice idea to save some extra code.